Alright, I got a video for you tonight on Tuesday called The Story of Orochimaru as told by Darius the Green Angel. Now, it happened a long, long time ago, and Orochimaru was born. He was born in the Hidden Leaf Village. He was a Hidden Leaf, child, right? He lost his parents at a young age. So Hiruzen basically had to raise him too, like he was his son. You know, this boy ended up in a group of three, and he was the best of these three. He, oh fuck, I think I might have. He was the one who shined the brightest. He was good at using ninjutsu. He was good at throwing knives and catching, getting the bells from Hiruzen as a boy. And he went on to fight in the, Shinobi Wars when they came up. I believe it was the third Shinobi War, or the second one. But he and Jiraiya and Tsunade, the other two, they got their name as Sanin by fighting a guy named Hanzo of the Salamander. Orochimaru, did his part. They all had summonings. His summoning was Manda, a big purple snake. It had, venom, toxic, but it also, did okay in that fight. He, went down a darker path after the war. He saw what war did to people. He said, people die, before they can do this and do that. He witnessed, Tsunade's, brother's dead body and other people's dead bodies. And he's like, if I ever hope to be the most powerful ninja, I need to live forever. So I can't, I can't do it. I can't, live like everybody else and live a natural life. I have to, be special is what he believed. And he wanted to try to keep his life sustained. So he wanted to learn immortality jutsu. But in order to do this, he was doing experiments on people. He was caught by Hiruzen. He was like, hey, what are you doing? I thought you were going to be the next Hokage after me. You showed, promise. You showed that you could, possibly be, and he actually was ahead of Danzo, believe it or not. That's what people don't realize in Naruto, At that point in time, he was considering retiring and shit. He had, Minato and him and, Jiraiya was there, he, could have been, but he wanted to go and dissect people's bodies and, learn forbidden jutsu, shit that he wasn't supposed to. Here's an to go in there and put the kibosh on him. Say, hey, you're, killing our people, for your purposes. That's not good. I didn't, train you to be that way. He's like, nope, you won't kill your own student. You'll let me leave. And he did. But he couldn't, see past Orochimaru as that little boy that he took in. But after that, he regretted that because Orochimaru, he then went into the Akatsuki. He was running around doing his own thing for a little bit. But the Akatsuki ended up catching him. It was Pain and Sorcery. They ended up catching his ass. And they were like, we need to keep him on a leash. This snake would play games and try to, fuck us up. He'd play our, he would try to fuck our day up. We're trying to hunt till beasts. We better keep, him close and not at bay. Because he could be a problem for us. So he was there, and he was partners with Sorcery, I believe. But then when Itachi showed up, he made his move. I'm referring to his eyes, and that's the Mangekyu Sharingan. The Sharingan that Itachi had was intriguing to Orochimaru, and he wanted him, but he couldn't get him. Just like he couldn't get Pain's Rinnegan. He tried to snatch Pain's eyes, but he couldn't get him either. So, since he couldn't obtain Dojutsu, he left the Akatsuki. And then he formed his own village, the Hidden Sound Ninja. They were under his wing. But he also had an agent named Kabuto under his wing. He was an espionage person already. But then, Orochimaru took him when he didn't know where to go. And he was like, you know what? You just keep being an espionage guy for me. He'll infiltrate the, Sand Village. He ended up going into the tuning exams, but he killed Rasa before he did that, right? He killed the fourth Kazekage, and he obtained, and after he left the Akatsuki, he had a move called reanimation jutsu. He would use that later on, so he fought against Sasuke in the woods during the tuning exams. And he knew about Sasuke because he knew that Itachi had one brother left, and he was younger. That means he could manipulate Sasuke into what he needed him to do. Or that's what he believed. He really enticed Sasuke with extra power. I have power. I branded you. He had a move called the curse mark. He put a curse mark on Sasuke, and he left. But he didn't leave. He was going to try to destroy Konoha, So um, he snuck people into the, tuning exams. He was there himself. And then by the finals, he was wearing Ross's skin, his face. And it was funny too, because when he came back to the village, they, the sign that they knew he was here was people were missing their faces. Their faces were gone. He said, they said, hey, only one person can do something like this, and we all know who that might be. It's Orochimaru. He's back. And that's what he did. They had no faces and shit because he would take their skin and wear it, because he needed it, to keep his life going now. Because he wasn't human anymore. And that's what Hiruzen told him. He's like, you're not a human anymore. You're stealing bitches' faces and stuff. You're out here, wearing, their like everything, and doing that shit, to find a vessel so you can be immortal, you know. You fell so low, you had so much, but now I have to fight. And they ended up fighting. Now, he ended up defeating Hiruzen, essentially. He forced him to use the Reaper Death Seal, which didn't work on him because he had, fought against Hiruzen, and only his arms got sealed. Now Orochimaru was pissed because his arms got sealed away and he couldn't use jutsu anymore. But Hiruzen died, not taking Orochimaru with him. So that came back to bite him because then he left with the Sound Ninja, the Sound Ninja 4, and Kabuto. They got away. He then went to Tsunade, who he knew was a healing specialist. He said, you remember me from back in the day, girl, help me out, I'll bring your brother back to life. That's how he did it. But also when he was fighting Hiruzen, he brought back the first and second Hokage. So it was a hard fought battle for Hiruzen. But he still ended up, sealing away the first and second. But he still had that move in his bag. He was gonna try to, entice her with that. And like, if you restore my arms, I can bring your brother back to life. But Jiraiya got to her and said, that's not the case because he would just control their body and all this other stuff. They're already gone. So don't, you need to like look ahead and stop living in the past. And then Orochimaru was like, well, we'll have to fight, because I need my arms back. And Kabuto was fighting with her, and then they had to retreat because, it was dry and Tsunade, and then Naruto was doing shit. They got away. But then Orochimaru was getting sick because it's like every 3 years he needs a new body because he did that to himself. he has to shed his skin and take a new form. So this guy was looking for a suitable vessel because Sasuke didn't get there in time. So he would then have to wait another 3 years. After Naruto and Sasuke fought, it took too long, so he had to take somebody else's body and use their skin. So then he did that. Um, Orochimaru then met Naruto on the Tenchi Bridge 3 years later, and he was like, "Hey, um, I'm here, and Sasuke is, gonna be, and then Naruto, fought against him. Orochimaru was fighting against the Nine Tails in the blood form, and he actually got a hit off on him. I gave him credit for that, but he had to retreat because he didn't know if Naruto was gonna go back to normal or if the Nine Tails' full power were gonna show. So then he left. So then after that, Orochimaru was hiding in the, bunker, the little, hideout that he had, right? And he stopped Sasuke from using Kyurem, and then he got sick again because, like I said, 3 years and he would need a new skin, right? And he was saving Sasuke because with Sasuke's body, he wouldn't have to wait as long for the next time he needs to take a body, you know. And he would have extra power because of Sasuke's dojutsu. So he tried to absorb Sasuke, and my favorite character ended up turning the tables on him. You know, he ended up getting absorbed. Orochimaru did. But then Orochimaru, once Sasuke became weaker during the fight with Itachi, he ended up popping out of the curse mark. See, the curse mark, he made a little, loophole in it or something so that he could sustain his life through that. He could revive himself through the curse mark, essentially. This guy, has those fucking moves about him, and that's how he ends up being who he is. When it's all said and done. But he ended up emerging from the curse mark, and then Tachi sealed him away. But then later on, when Itachi and Sasuke fought against Kabuto, who then, assumed Orochimaru's position essentially, and believed he was Orochimaru because he absorbed his, DNA, injected his blood with his DNA, and became a serpent sage essentially. And he was, pretty damn good at what he was doing. But Sasuke took, that energy back and, recouped Orochimaru. You know, Orochimaru was the curse mark, the chakra that was within Kabuto, and then Orochimaru went back to helping Sasuke out, but he was basically Sasuke's lackey because at that point he looked at Sasuke and said, "I couldn't beat you. Even if I wanted to, there's no chance, man." So then he ends up being Sasuke's bitch for a little bit, but they go and he summons the Hokages from the dead. He's like, we could force you. I could force you to kill or destroy this village right now, but there's a war going on, and it's whatever Sasuke decides. Because now he's a side character. He ain't a villain anymore like he used to be. Now he still is a little bit, like that, right? He'll do unethical things at times, and he will too. But he ended up recouping the five Kage who fought against Madara. They ended up, needing recoup, to be healed up again, right? Put her back together again with Katsuyu and got them ready to fight against people. You know, he was put under the Tsukuyomi though, and then he was, out. After the war, Orochimaru. See, and that's the thing, this fucker was lucky and shit because out of the three Sanin, he went through phases where he stole face. Well, he was a part of the, shinobi. He was a ninja. He was cool with it. Then he was in the wars. He went down a dark path. He started doing experiments, to find the immortality jutsu, reanimation jutsu, improving upon what Toriyama did, and he could summon multiple or like two or three, or four at one point. But he was still in faces and other things. But he graduated to a Zetsu body, and he had Hashirama cells a little bit. Um, this boy, this guy ended up looking younger in Boruto, is what I'm saying. And Tsunade lost her chest. So when it came down to those three, you know, he got the better deal. And it's kind of like, crazy because he wasn't the most like, he wasn't the good guy out of them. He wasn't the one that you would want to see, survive, is what I'm saying. The one you would want to see, go on and live. But he ended up living because he just, had a way to, like, he was needed too, you know, because his mind was just, he was actually one of the smartest characters in the series, but he's like unethical about things. Human life is for the, greater good of, or that's what he tries to say, but it's for his own, motives, what he wants to do. He wants to, become immortal. So he's gonna, take bodies and do experiments so he can figure out what the hell he has to do. You know, he's, making, clones of a guy named Mitsuki and other things in Boruto. But Naruto, had to like put put sanctions on them and like, hey man, he can't be, doing the shit where he's stealing faces. You can't be looking after people's bodies. You can't be, doing this, doing that. We have Yamato, we have Sasuke. We got eyes on you, motherfucker. Yeah, calm down. Yeah, chill the fuck out with all that extra. Yeah, and like you ain't gonna get by me. Those other, Hokages might have been, cool with you, or might not have been aware of what was going on, but me, not me. And Orochimaru, he understood that he had two shinobis there who were, way. There's nothing that he could do to bridge that gap. So he was just, a guy that was doing science at the end of the day. But Orochimaru is one of those characters, you guys like him or you don't. I like the fact that he's powerful, but not like what he does to attain that power. I don't like that part about him. You know, but with that, that's the story of Orochimaru as told by Darius the Green Angel. And be cool, call in the corner.